hockey factories. Oddly enough, or maybe completely obviously, I found this episode to be the hardest to write. How do you define communication? How do you provide examples of communication when the recordings are simply that? One aspect of coaching I've always been fascinated with was how do you get a message across to 20 plus ears with 20 different ways of processing information and getting everyone to pull or push at the right time? Is it actually a thing that happens? I ask that question fully knowing that the most important part of what we're doing here as coaches is that communication. But how do coaches spread their message? How do programs communicate with each other? And where does the most important part of communication actually come from?
As I said, I have really good coaches, but also they are like a really good people. I have really good relationship with everybody, and I think like this job and this work happens so much. Like how can you communicate and that kind of stuff. That helps, and that's why the progress happens. They like a pretty good good communication with the coaches, and that's have to be a one thing why the club is going in the right direction.
That's Timo Pusa from Jokerit in Finland, and I'm Matt Dumichel, and this is episode 3 of the Hockey Factories podcast. We'll try to unpeel the onion that is communication between coaches, players, and organizations. I want to bring in a personal story that somewhat correlates with coaching, and that's parenting. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son, and I find one of the hardest things to do is to communicate my rules and requests and to get them to acknowledge and process it and turn it into action. They understand what I'm asking them to do, but somewhere it disconnects, and it's not easy. It can be very frustrating, in fact, and one thing I've learned from being around coaches, and Scott May of the Okanagan Hockey Academy alludes to it here, that part I have to own.
I do have a kind of a saying, if our kids don't get it, if we're not, it's not their fault. We have to look internally to our coaching staff and say, that is my fault. What are they not getting? That is 100% on the coach, 100%. Not that kid's not skilled enough. He's not smart enough. He's not this. He's not that. Yeah, we could go all day. We're in the business of making them better, and for our coaches too, that challenges them. I got to explain it differently. I got to rehearse it differently. I got to find ways. We are solution-based programming where we have to find answers to our problems, not just talk about the problems.
I have changed my messaging. I have changed the way I deliver a message. I will ask other parents I admire, especially my girlfriend who has a daughter of her own, how do they get across that message? And how do their kids respond? Sound like something else we're doing here? It's even harder to do that with a group, which is where Jokerit Director of Youth Coaching, Mikko Nurminen, takes us through how they get their goals across to an entire team of youngsters.
Then always about the connection and remind that coaching is not about the drills, it's about the connection and that we should need. It's always nice to talk to the talkative kids, but let's remember the shy kids and stuff like the team rules, like how important is it to establish them in the beginning, and now we have experimented even the small kids that they could get a stay. We try to split them in small groups where they can actually, if there's 27 years old discussing about rules, it's not that easy, but if you split them in groups of 4 or 5, then you can have a conversation about what is a nice teammate or stuff like that. So really basics like learning and how to organize practice and stuff like that.
If a team is not on the same page, it is very, very difficult to see success. If 10 kids are pulling but another group is not, then either the message broke down or the kids haven't bought into it yet. And that goes back to Mike Needham's comments from episode 2, and a question you're seeing asked all the time by kids of every age group. Why? Why do I have to do this? What's in it for me? How is this going to make me better? It isn't to make kids sound spoiled or rude or selfish. It's a very fair question that they're starting to be able to ask their coaches because of the way coaching and communication has changed over the last years. Kids now feel comfortable being able to ask those questions because of the relationships they build with their coaches, the lines of communications that have been open through trust. Honesty is a very big part of that, and that's something OHA coach Mike Needham stresses with his group.
Really understanding how the real world is going to treat you. That might seem funny, but I'm a very straightforward coach. I don't sugarcoat. I don't try to be hurtful in any way, that's not what I'm saying, but just straightforward and honest. And I think to a man, they appreciated that, and that's probably the biggest thing. They'll come back and say, "Man, I get it. It's not, oh, Johnny, you played well. You didn't play very well, and here's why, and here's what you need to do." When you get into the real world, and that goes for the work, the real world work world as well. You don't do your job, you don't keep it, and you don't do it well, you're gonna hear about it from your boss. So that, to me, I think is the biggest takeaway from those players, is that thank you for being honest, and you got me ready for what's going to happen in real life. And ultimately, that's I'm proud of that fact for sure.
As an example, one of the big conversations any coach has to have with their players is their role on the team. When you have kids coming in from across the country or continent in some cases, you're dealing with players who have always been the star. Mike and his group at OHA are pretty used to that.
I call them all thoroughbreds coming in, and they all want the ball, they all want the puck, and it's establishing roles throughout the year. I do a lot of goal setting. I talk to the kids. We have those conversations all the time on what you are, what that player feels he is as a player. Then I'll have input into my thoughts. And, usually what happens is you through that, you get to know the kids, you develop that trust, and they understand that in order to be a good teammate, maybe it is a role that they will have to accept later on in their careers as they move through as well. So it's basically just being honest, have an open dialogue, also having the families included in those. I do a lot of conversations and have a lot of conversations with family, and just be really clear. And, for the most part, it's worked out very well.
You may not like what the coach has to say, but he's being honest, and that's all you can ask. Not every kid on your team is going to play on the power play. Not every kid is going to be on the ice for the last 2 minutes of the game. That's okay. Where coaches go so completely wrong so quickly is they don't effectively communicate that. Or worse, they promise it all to everyone and no one is happy. You see that in recruiting from every level as well. How many programs can you think of right now in your circuit that tell 20 kids they're going to be getting top minutes? They're going to be on the top power play. Oh, you're the starting goalie for sure. And this is just to get kids in the door. How well does that work for those programs? Kids can weed through the bullshit. Trust is only established through connected communication and delivering on the expectations you mutually agree upon. If that's your way of doing business, you're failing in both aspects before a player has even tied his skates in your locker room for the first time. Thomas Taskinen says that communication starts right away with young kids, and the younger the better. The first thing they talk about is making mistakes and almost encouraging them.
What I would like to see, and I think that there are a good bunch of boys that are going towards that direction, is that when they are on ice, they show effort, which creates competitiveness, and they have tools to face adversity, because there will be that for sure. And I think some of the guys, when they have a personal mistake or foul on ice, they are too harsh on themselves.
All right, so we've been able to talk to the kids about making mistakes and that it's okay, and letting them encounter the adversity. But what do we do with that afterwards? Tomas continues.
Don't be afraid of mistakes. Have courage, because and I have underlined them several times that if you make a mistake on ice, that happens. Don't worry about that. I've done it at least 1,000 times. So has Michael Jordan. But the idea is that when we do a mistake, we don't start worrying about that. We try to analyze it. Even though they are year 30, they don't do much of analyzing, but we can talk it through afterwards. That what can we do differently the other time, but what is done is done. You can't get the past here again, and just try to control those things that are controllable.
Not only are you allowing the mistakes to take place, but you're going the extra step to the players afterwards and talking to them about what happened. As I mentioned in my presentation at TCS Live, this isn't an accusatory conversation. This isn't a "what were you thinking?" with as many exclamation points as there are question marks. What did you see? What did you think was going to happen? Looking back, were there other options? Those 3 questions can open a litany of conversation pieces and take you in any number of directions. But it can only happen if the player trusts you enough to know these questions are being asked to help that player get better. You can ask those questions in response to a mistake. You can also ask them to a player who has an extremely high hockey IQ. Maybe you didn't see what they saw. Maybe they can explain it. Maybe you can learn from them. When kids get older and graduate through the ranks of minor hockey, they'll be faced with a number of adversities. Those adversities will only be seen in a positive light if the person they go through them with is a guide and not a restriction. There may not be a more crucial time for that than in high school. As student athletes, you're essentially introduced to having 2 full-time jobs. For the first time, learning time management skills, how to juggle homework and practice and games and workouts and study period. But let's make this very clear. At OHA, it's about one thing.
How does the school portion translate to the coaches? Like, are you involved? Well, you are involved with the day-to-day, pretty much with the coaching staff. But how do you guys work together on that?
Oh, I mean, that's a real part of our success, and it's daily. I mean, coaches are aware of attendance. We don't have a person miss a class, skip a class, late for a class. It just doesn't happen. If a student is falling behind, coach is very aware. And because we have study halls every day, students will have 2 teams will have a study hall a day, but if they're falling behind, they will be assigned to extra study halls, which means they could miss ice time. If anything is caught, like, if there's a more serious issue like plagiarism or anything like that, kids will miss games. Coaches are totally on board, like with everything. So, and there's 4 reporting periods a year that we do in addition to report cards that coaches get. So they know exactly where their student athletes stand pretty much about 7 to 8 times fully a year.
That's Dave Nicconi, who is in charge of the Hockey Academy kids in the school. He's a counselor at the school, and he's with the Hockey Academy full-time. He goes whichever direction the fire is in. School rules. There is a constant communication, and that's something Dave and his staff pride themselves in.
Anything I know from a student, be it behavior or something good, like we just had a student ace a huge physics test, coach knew this morning. So then coach can give that positive feedback to the student. And the same thing with goals. If a student is goofing off in class, coach knows. And so coach knows, parents know, we have study hall teachers. So if a kid's doing well, he's probably going to get the pat in the back about 5 times by the time at the end of the day. And if he's not doing well, he's probably going to get the opposite.
Through the process of interviewing countless coaches, managers, and support staff through the Hockey Factory series, one thing I've come to appreciate is that when coaches stop learning, so do players. The game is constantly evolving, and that's why the best coaches trust the coaches site to keep them up to date on the latest developments in the game. The Coaches site provides professional coaches and experts in athlete performance a platform to share their knowledge and experience with a global community of coaches. Think of the Coaches site like Netflix for coaches. A membership unlocks over 500 hours of video, 750 drills broken down by level and category, along with an extensive library of articles providing you detailed tactical and analytical analysis on every aspect of coaching hockey. All delivered by the brightest minds in hockey, some of whom you'll hear about in Hockey Factories. Listeners to the Hockey Factories podcast can save $30 off an annual subscription by using the coupon code HOCKEYFACTORIES. Simply go to thecoachessite.com and enter Hockey Factories at checkout to save $30 and join a community of like-minded coaches who are committed to being great leaders and teachers. Also, all the clubs featured in Hockey Factories have group memberships to the Coaches site, ensuring every one of their coaches has the opportunity to be mentored by the best coaches in the game. In fact, most of hockey's top development organizations leverage the Coaches site to ensure they're up to date with the latest trends in the game and player development. If your club or association is interested in learning more about a group membership, please visit thecoachessite.com/groups. Again, that's thecoachessite.com/groups to learn more from hockey's top leagues, clubs, and organizations and how they stay on top of the game. So for the Academy to work, we need coaches, schools, parents, players, and administrators on the same page. If something gets missed, one branch of the tree could fall off and then all is for naught. But how do staffs communicate? We talk about a breakdown amongst the players if they can't understand or they don't believe in what they're doing. You can only imagine, and likely to have plenty of examples of, a situation where coaches themselves don't buy in or believe or understand. Consistency has been a big role in that, and Olli-Pekka explains Jokerit has been able to take their time planning that structure of the entire program together.
So 5 years ago, we emphasized what's the identity of our team play, and then maybe 4 years ago we emphasized the program, how to help individual players to improve their skills and so on and so on. For 2 years we have discussed a lot about how we lead the team, about the leadership and how we communicate with the players and so on and so on. That wouldn't have been possible if the staff hasn't been so long for a long time here. So the big thing is that we have our board of directors have patience to give us time to make some progress in our developing process.
There's Jokerit playing the long game again. But what about a program that doesn't have guys who've been together for 10 or 5 or even 3 years together? How do they build that understanding throughout the club or the academy of what gets taught and how? We ask Mikko Nurminen.
It's communication from us to the teams, but also to parents, and then it's communication also inside the team, like the best teams or the best coaching groups we have. They're always very good at communication, or the head coach is really good at that. So I think it's we've been getting better at it, and I think it's and we also try to communicate more to parents. We send like a monthly newsletter instead of trying to send a lot of small messages. Whenever possible, we only send that one. There's a news and there's maybe updates, and then there might be message from our partner sports store and stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like we are like a 500 players if you count the hockey school. So a lot of different opinions and perceptions about things. So needs to be really clear about communication.
You can imagine your staff of 5 guys having different opinions. A program like Jokerit or Frölunda has, safe to say, 40-something coaches under that umbrella. They find a coaching newsletter bridges a lot of those conversations and creates new ones.
Me and my colleague write like a weekly. It's like a weekly email where we tell our schedule, like where we are in that practice on Monday, and
Right.
on Tuesday we are in that practice, and on Wednesday evening I have a meeting, and Thursday I'm off, and on Friday this and sort of that, and we also then we try to highlight things like have maybe one topic like there has been a discussion about this thing in youth hockey now. You might have seen the article last week, or here's an interesting clip, and sort of try to communicate to everybody mostly about the same things we should have in that club Bible, like how to coach and how we learn. So give a little bit of information every week.
Another piece of advice on the topic Mikko presents is everyone getting together.
What we have been experimenting for a couple of years now is that instead of us, the club always having sort of the thick Bible of how things are done, we sort of have a framework, and we try to work with the head coaches. Like we have workshops a few times a year, and we started experimenting, and sometimes one of them presents one group is doing something very well, or they experiment something and it worked well. So one of the head coaches might be then presenting the rest, and then basically we talk about the big structure, and if we we are now thinking about sort of trying to make the sort of the what should be coached at which level even more clearer. So we then might run it by them in that workshop. Like we've been thinking about this, like how do you feel like, are your kids old enough to do this, or is it like so have like this kind of cooperation.
Remember, this is the same club, but why does it have to be? If you're coaching a U13 program, why can you not get the coaches from other teams in your district together to share ideas, coaching advice, practice plans, and whatever else? After all, aren't we doing this for the betterment of the kids? You may or may not be surprised by some people's answer to that question. Now let's be clear on something else too, and Scott May from OHA is going to elaborate on this. None of these programs have a "this is how we coach" mentality. There's a philosophy, there's a guideline, and there's a template in place. But like Scott says, the coaches get to add their own flavor.
We don't want 17 different agendas and ideologies. We talk about that. I think collaboration is huge, and I think the more that you collaborate, people start talking the same language anyways. I think that is also another really important part, that we as staff, our message to the kids is clear, it's direct, and we're all using the same language. Of course, there's always flexibility. That's the fun part about coaching. You have your team. Not every team is the same. You have kids that are 12 and 13 and kids that are 17 and 18. You're going to be teaching, different levels to those kids, but the fundamental basis of what you're teaching is ultimately the same. It's a constant teaching and repetition of the structure and of the habit and the routine of the skill set and the information that we're giving them.
So where are we now? After the coaches have collaborated together to create the philosophy and the mission of the program, and the coaches have explained, taught, and communicated their message to the players. Well, we land possibly at the most important part of that communication chain, and that has to be from inside the room itself.
Because this is the next thing, we like to have older players explain system then to the younger guys. We have also like meetings where players or sometimes whatever one line has to explain some kind of system on video. They have to cut that stuff themselves and explain it to the team.
Oh, that's great.
That they speak in front of the team and all those kinds of things. Because also leading, we also talk about big leadership, but also leading needs to be taught. And there you see if somebody's comfortable in a role or not, because the best player is not every time that guy that is really comfortable to be a real leader. The best leader is now playing up and down, second lead, fourth line in Mannheim in the DEL, and sometimes as a centerman. And if they have enough older guys, he's playing again down in the second league for the farm team. But he was a leader. He always did what he was supposed to do. He can talk in front of the group. He was a big, really liked kid. He was respected, and because of his work ethic of everything he did and taking care of the team. So this was a real leader, and he was a third liner. So it doesn't matter, it's not like always the big shots that you need to lead.
During his time with Young Elder Mannheim, Frank Fischhauer instilled leadership into his team. That's putting them in uncomfortable situations. That's giving them his trust. And that's being able to make sure the message is trying to be communicated from different voices and that the room is owning that message together. When the players buy in, that's when you see the magic happen. I'm a huge fan of PJ Fleck, the head coach of the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers football program. I could listen to him talk for hours and be ready to run through a wall for him multiple times. Whether it's his quote or not is beyond the point here. I'm just happy I got to bring up my love for PJ Fleck. The quote goes, "Bad teams, no one leads. Average teams, coaches lead. But elite teams, players lead. And the players lead that through communication, through being a connected group from the top down, to believe the message, to live the message, and to bring it into the group." Seriously, find a PJ Fleck video on YouTube or read his book with John Gordon. He's unreal. I ask you this as we bring episode 3 to a close. Share your knowledge. Share it with your staff, share it with your players, share it with your fellow coaches, no matter what team they're with. And don't pretend like you know it all. Listen twice as much as you speak, and be honest with your players. Whether it's parenting, coaching, or any other relationship you experience in life, if the communication breaks down, you may not be coming back. We preview our next episode with one of my favorite quotes from the series. This is Dixon Ward from the Okanagan Hockey Academy.
The end goal is our kids, we want them. I have a list of objectives that we, on the hockey side of things, that we want to accomplish, and they're real simple, but there's something that our coaches have to document on a weekly basis if they're touching on those areas. We want to move better, we want to play faster, we want to handle the puck better, we want to score more, we want to work harder, we want to be better people and understand the game better. That's pretty clear and easy objectives. Let's make sure that we're not missing any of those.
In the Hockey Factory's articles, we took 5 of the best programs in the world and broke them down to find where their success comes from. Just as importantly for each of those groups is not where they've been, but where they're going. How do they stay on top? What can they do better? In episode 4, we look to the future and see if we can pick out what these programs do that maybe yours can do for sustained success. Thank you for listening to the Hockey Factory's podcast so far. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen and enjoy this series, and I hope you're getting as much out of it as I am. I'm Matt Dumichel, and we'll talk to you soon.